Welcome, everyone. It's great to see all of you joining us this evening. We are going to let everybody just take another minute or two to get connected and into the Zoom room so that everyone can hear, and we'll kick off tonight's presentation. So give us just a second, grab a quick drink, resituate yourself, and we will start momentarily. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are going to give 1 second and we will get started in just a moment.
Hey everyone, so happy that you can join us. I think we've got people from all over the country, and in a minute we'll ask you to do a shout out. First of all though, my name's Helen French and I'm the Director of Development and Continuing Education at NASW New Jersey. Thrilled that you're here for this presentation where social work can lead you. Journeys into, around, and even out of social work, which I was just talking to Deb, one of our panelists, and she said, she mentioned, you know, that she's no longer in social work. And I was like, you know what, once you're a social worker, always a social worker, right? So, but we're really pleased. We've got these great panelists to come and share their experience. And we are so happy to make the connection to Jess, who's been wonderful about gathering us all. So Jess, please go ahead.
Hi guys, thanks for coming. We're so excited to share this project with you. There's 24 authors of this book and 5 of us are here today. And so I'm Jess Hooper, I'm one of the authors, and we're gonna all quickly introduce ourselves and then we'll dive right into sort of the book process, and then the 5 of us will share our journeys into, around, or out of social work. And then we'll leave a lot of the time so that you guys can talk to us about it too, your journey if you have questions. And so I'm gonna, Hillary, do you wanna introduce yourself and we'll just walk through the 5?
Hi, everybody. I'm Hillary Weaver. I'm speaking to you from Onondaga Territory in Western New York State. And I am the board chair of the Council on Social Work Education. I'm also the president of Indigenous and Tribal Social Work Educators Association. And I am the inaugural chair of the Indigenous Commission for International Federation of Social Workers. So I will throw it over to Deb to introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Deb. I'm from central Minnesota. It's a small town called Sartell, which is in the St. Cloud area. I am technically not practicing social work right now. I am a holistic healer. I have 20 plus years of experience as a massage therapist as well. I have my master's in social work. And part of my journey still is not done. I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate systems in order to merge and intersect the 2 professions in order to provide treatment for emotional release and trauma work. And how about Christina?
Hello. I'm Christina Broderick. I am located in New Jersey, not too far outside of Manhattan. I am a licensed social worker, certified school social worker, an adjunct professor. So I teach up and coming social workers. But most notably, I am the founder and CEO of my own company. It is a consulting company called Broderick & Co., where we have a mental health arm where we work directly with education programs, schools, districts, as well as corporations on how they can become become more mental health forward, as well as business consulting, where I help social workers to launch and grow their own service-based business. I have no idea who's next.
I'll take it, Christina.
Okay, cool.
Hi, everyone. Wonderful to be here. My name is Michelle Sneed. I'm located in southern Minnesota. Wear a few hats. I am the department chair at the College of St. Scholastica in their social work program. I also, of course, teach. I do some clinical work on the side, and we are also a family that is a licensed foster home. So we're busy, and it's great to be here today.
Okay, that is us. That's the 5 of us that you guys have get to have a conversation with, and we get to have a conversation with you. All of us are either practicing social workers or have been in social work education. Christina is the one that connected us with NASW of New Jersey, so that is why we're here. So shout out to Christina for facilitating this. I'm going to intro the book, and so you guys, I'm going to read this to you just quickly, and then I'm going to intro some of the authors, and then I swear I won't read anything else past that. So just the first few slides. Okay, so the book is Where Social Work Can Lead You, and this is an invitation by professionals and leaders to share in their journeys through personal stories. So within a short number of pages, because we all just wrote a chapter, authors took to sharing some of the pivotal moments that shaped their journey into, around, and some of us even out of social work. And then we also want to acknowledge that the stories are told from the author's perspective. And so some of the journeys shared do contain sensitive content. So we want you guys to know that courage was required to write these stories. In this book, you'll also find stories that started long ago and some that are just starting. So we have some chapters by brand new social workers, but there are some themes that show up within the chapters. So the deep desire to be connected to others, the desire to help, the desire to see those that feel unseen, and arise to the call for social justice. And so for me, when I was thinking through this book project and connecting with the authors you see and then the other authors, I really wanted people to know that storytelling is social action. And so we wanted to show the people behind the profession. Sharing journey stories does build momentum to connect. It helps you seek others' journey stories. It helps you see the journey story within yourself. And so that's what we're hoping to inspire, is that we will see the power in sharing our own journeys, seeking others' journeys, and kind of the collective building within that. And so part of what was really important in this book for me is that all of us, all 24 authors, were really participating in kind of challenging the social work status quo by inviting you, the readers of the book, to see the person within the profession from a different vantage point than has been done before. And so I'm going to show you a picture, maybe. Yes. Here is the 24 authors in this book. You can play I Spy and find the 5 photos of the people that are here today. So this book starts with 17 different journeys into social work by people that are still practicing in the field of social work. And so you're going to find themes among those, much like that I introed this book. But then in the middle of this book, you guys, there's 4 stories shared by those that are around social work. So social work's closest collaborative partners, like psychology, education. There's even business consulting that intersects IT-wise with social work. And it's important for me that we included them because they really do influence collaboratively with us the thoughts, words, and deeds of the helping professions. So we have them in the middle of this book. And then at the end of this book, we have a few journeys shared, and Deb is one of those that have sort of worked their way out of social work, because social work is a system, right? We know that. And systems have boundaries. And some of the journey stories don't fit into those currently conformed boundaries. So what was important to me is if you're ever going to push boundaries wider, you have to have boundary pushers. And so we have some of those that started in social work and have worked their way out. And we wanted to show that these stories can help you consider how social work influences innovation in new integrative therapeutic strategies, which Deb will talk to you about in her journey. But also one of the journeys is how social work can really be the next interior design strategy, how your social work background can really help you be this very connected person, even in design, which is, out of social work. And we all know, right, system boundaries really aren't any match for a heart on a mission. And so I wanted to demonstrate that you are going to find yourselves, especially as students, thinking this is where you want to be, and you might end up in a totally different space, but what Social Work Foundation is built on will guide you and lead you, and never goes away. You know, like Helen said in the beginning, once a social worker, always a social worker. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own journey story before passing it over to the rest of the authors. So this is me, Jess Hooper. I've been in social work over 15 years. And my chapter is about the power of a connected moment, because my journey into social work started sort of with many poignant disconnected moments. And I found the helper's capacity within those connected moments, if they were not present and aware of the power they held in those connected moments, really could impact somebody's life trajectory. And so you will see in this book that I sort of started with this really prominent disconnected moment in education. And no shame or blame on the person that afforded this learning opportunity. It really was grand for me, because it changed what I thought possible for myself, where I thought I could go in the world. But it also showed me my strength and reflection had always been there. I just needed to reconnect with it. And so that is, you know, I found curiosity was curing for me, always has been, always was, but this really built that. My path to knowing that I was a heart on a mission to keep connected moments within social work, but I didn't start in social work. In fact, I didn't even know what social work was until I graduated with my first bachelor's degree. So I started college, I switched majors, I don't even know, 7 times probably. Started in teaching, because that's what I really thought I was going to do. Went to criminal justice, kind of like speech pathology, and then I ended in sociology, because that's where I found I fit the best in what I had experienced. And I started college really young. I was only 17 when I started. So I was like new to adult. And then I graduated 4 years later with a sociology degree, started working in the field and found social workers. And I thought, what is this profession? This is what I need to be doing. These values, their ethics are so aligned with what I want to be doing in the world. So then I went back to undergrad in social work. But that was not before being rejected by several of social work's collaborative partners for grad school. So I kept trying to go a different way, and then did find social work and found my soul's purpose in this work. And then I was a social worker when I started. That child welfare was the last thing that I wanted to do. Therapy was what I thought I wanted to do. Child welfare was the very last thing, for many of the reasons everyone else that doesn't want to do it says they don't want to do it. But I was in an incredibly dysfunctional job, and there was this posting for high risk child protection social worker. And I thought, well, I got to do something. So I applied, got it. And I have never had the honorable experiences that I had in that work. Those families and kids touch your soul differently than anywhere else. And I was ignited. You know, it transformed me back to some of my own disconnected moments. Like in high school, I was the kid that got a D in English, and people would say, she can't do the work. It was not that I can't do the work, it's that I didn't do the work, right? There's a difference between those. I wasn't connected to why you needed to do the work. And so but that helped me in child welfare see, we're calling things problems, but is that really the problem? Because I didn't meet a single parent that woke up and said, I want to be a crappy parent today. Not one time did I meet anybody that said that. So I found my passion in child welfare. And then throughout that span of life, I also built my family, and I found these really poignant moments of connection to myself by becoming a mother at the same time of being a child protection social worker. Parenting is very activated. I found connection to others through that work. And then I found connection to collective, which is in the book, and an experience that I had at my grandfather's funeral that sort of like momented me into what I needed to be doing and what I am doing now in the world. And that is primarily just reflective coaching, training, teaching. I adjunct teach for social work, St. Scholastica, where Shelley is too. And then for me, what led to this book is listening to stories is what is important to me. People sharing their journey stories, having people that will listen to them, but also people saying you can be brave enough to share it, because stories are hard to share. All of us have had spaces of suffering, but many more, and we need to bear witness to those journey stories so we can move this profession forward. And so that is my very fast path through and into social work. I'm still in social work. I intend to be here until I cannot be, which will likely be the end of this earthly journey for me. So I intend to be on it as long as I can be. And this is our book, you guys. When you see it, every chapter ends with the author's pearl of wisdom. And so I wanted it to be read much like if you just needed inspiration, social work inspiration, you could open it up to the end of any chapter and read the pearl of wisdom. And so others will share theirs too, but this is mine that encapsulates my social work journey. You can never fully know the power within a moment of connection until that moment is reviewed through reflection, but you can be certain that every connected moment is enhanced if you are fully present. And so that is what I have learned through this process of my journey into and within social work. Okay, I'm going to pass it off to Christina.
Awesome. Hello, hello. So excited to be here, as I said earlier. Mine is pretty similar to Jess's. I'm just going to quickly talk about actually a little bit of my upbringing, because I think that's pretty important for what I continue to show up and do as it relates to social work. Before talking a little bit about my journey within the field and how I've kind of landed to where I am at now, where I run my own company, which is called Broderick & Co., also formerly known as Ignite EDU. So the name of my chapter is called Transforming Our Experiences, and I'll talk about that a little more at the end when I share my pearl of wisdom. So I'm a first-generation American. My family hails from Jamaica. My mother was the first in her family. She's the second of 9 to move to the United States and settled here to start her family. But my father left when I was 2 years old. I am the youngest of 3. And because of that was a lot of financial turmoil. So soon after, we actually lost our home and had to move into the basement of my mom's friend. So it was the 5 of us living in a basement, and I say 5 of us because my grandmother would frequently come over to help my mother to raise us. And I mentioned that in the book, and I'm sharing that here because when I was writing the book, and I think someone mentions this as well, we talked about how we write the book to be inspirational, but the process is also very healing. So it wasn't until I was writing my chapter that this moment really stood out for me in terms of the need for expansion, the need for more, because when it's 5 people living in a basement, and it's not a lavish basement, it was just 1 room, 1 bathroom, and some cabinets. Like that was it. We had to use like our mattresses and like our boxes to make rooms, right? And I remember even then, I think I was around maybe like 5 or 6 or so. I will never forget just like wanting to just like sleep away the entire day. I didn't want to have to face my reality because, you know, I went to a Catholic school my whole life. I've gone to Catholic schooling because if anyone comes from an immigrant family, education is not that it's not important for people who are non-immigrant families, but when your parents do come here with the hope to have a better life than they did, right? They put so much emphasis on education. So even though my mother couldn't afford a house, she was still sending us to Catholic school. And being surrounded by other people who did have these beautiful homes and these nice cars, right? My mom still jokes that when she would drop us off at school, if we didn't take the bus, we'd ask her to drop us down the block because her car was falling apart and did not look as nice. But that has those kinds of experiences growing up have led me to be this like constant go-getter. I'm always needing more. I'm hyper dependent, right? And it's had such a toll on my life. So now being recently 32, my birthday was yesterday, so I just turned 32. I still struggle with like slowing down and being present. So I really do love that's how Jess kind of ended her chapter with her pearl of wisdom about being present, because that is such an important part of how we decide the small moments and the big moments of our lives. So I'm very grateful for my therapist who has been really pivotal in how I'm able to have shaped the life that I have now. And then that connects, if you can go to the next slide, a little bit to my social work journey. So I actually have my bachelor's degree in psychology. from LaSalle University in Philly. My goal was to go to medical school. So when I would see social work, I just, like most people, thought social work is like you just work for the government and you go into people's homes and like take their kids away, right? Like that is what I thought social work was. And again, being from an immigrant family, I wanted to be like top notch and like be the best there can be, right? So I was like, cool, like let's be a doctor. What else? Thank you for that. So after I graduated, I actually moved to California to do an AmeriCorps program out there to work with some students who are under-resourced and underserved, right? And in the process, I was still interviewing for medical school. But as I was going on through the flying around the country to different medical schools, I was just like, every time I went to an interview, I always said, I hope they don't ask me why I want to be a doctor. I didn't have a valid reason. And I feel like that's a pretty strong like red flag before you do something like medical school that's extremely expensive, extremely arduous, right? So I moved back to New Jersey, born and raised here, and I began working in a neuroscience, neuropsychology lab, right? I had my psych background, thought maybe I wanted to go into research with that because I knew I didn't really like therapy. I knew it, even as a psychology major, I didn't want to do therapy. So I thought research. And then I worked in research and I was like, this is boring as heck. Did not like that. So upon reflecting about my experience in California, I knew that I wanted to reconnect within the education space in some way. So looking up different ways that we can work within education, because I know I didn't want to be a teacher, I discovered social work. And I loved how many things you can do with a social work degree. I think that was the most attractive feature for me. As I mentioned earlier, right? I don't like being constricted. Stems back to my childhood. I like expansion. And I love that social work felt expansive to me, that I could do so many things within the field and with the degree. So I got my MSW from Boston University, and I did their clinical track, even though I knew that I didn't want to do clinical work. My reasoning there was I wanted to be able to know how to help people on an individual level so that I can help them greater on a larger level. So as I said, I am my master's in social work. I'm a licensed social worker. I'm a certified school social worker. I've worked in quite a different amount of places. I've worked elementary school, middle school, high school, higher education. I worked in nonprofits. I worked in schools, obviously. And I always forget to mention that I actually was a therapist. Had to try it, right? Like I had to try it, see what it was about. Was not for me, right? I knew that, but he's like, you just kind of have to try it sometimes. So I did that for quite some time. And it's interesting because we get into conversations about licensure. And when people talk about the way that you can make money in social work, the only way that you can reach the top is that you must be a licensed clinical social worker. You must be fully credentialed, right? And I always push that narrative. It's not easy to become licensed, right? In terms of even like full licensure, which means like doing all the clinical hours at 3,000 or however many that your state requires. And I think it's so difficult and sometimes saddening when people just don't have the interest like me. I did not like being a therapist. I was great at it, right? A lot of my clients tried to find me after I left because they wanted to continue working with me, but I would be doing a disservice by forcing myself to do something I didn't like to do. So I really try to, which is what is going to my next point, is to help people see that there's so much more that you can do into not being boxed in. So I currently run my own consulting company for the past 4.5 years. That's a whole different story as to why I started my own company, but I can get into that later if you want to know, or you can read the book. But there's 2 arms to my company. So I do mental health consulting, where I work with a lot of schools, education programs, districts, corporations on how they can become more mental health forward. We do workshops, we do trainings. I have a whole online course. We do assessments, all that good stuff. And then most recently, I started business consulting. So I'm a soon to be accredited small business consultant, and I run a social work entrepreneurship incubator where I work directly with social workers and social work adjacent folks who are looking to build and grow their business. So it's really awesome. I get to work with clients all around the nation. If anyone is in California, you'll see my face next month as I'm one of the keynote speakers for the NASW California conference. So it's been really awesome, as I said, to see and to really live in the expansion of social work. I never thought I would land here, but I'm so happy I did. So my pearl of wisdom, I think, is on the next slide. Yes. It comes from one of my favorite quotes. It is at the end of every single presentation I do. It is here in my office because it really does ground me when I reflect on my life and thinking about what's to come. So you cannot control everything that happens to you in life, but you can fundamentally transform your experience. Life happens, our lived experiences are valid, and with that, we still have the ability to take charge over the direction of our lives. There's always opportunity, there's always options. We don't have to box ourselves in. And I think that is what I truly love most about the field of social work.
Thank you, Christina. Shelley.
Yes. Hello again, everyone. It's wonderful, like I said, to be here. So mine is really about finding your path. And Jess, you can go ahead and just start from the next slide. When Jess first approached me about doing this project, there was a few things that I had in mind that I thought that this project was going to bring forth. And one was more opportunity to learn about myself, which is something that I am continuously looking for. Obviously, the opportunity to learn about others and their stories and value their experiences, as well as the networking piece. What I didn't realize was that there was going to be a healing component to writing my story down. These were things that I had not thought about for many, many years. And I don't know that I've ever sat in my thoughts and thought about them. So like I said, this healing component was probably the most valuable in this process for me. Go ahead, Jess. So my journey began really, I grew up in many small communities. We moved around quite a bit. I was surrounded by a very large family, 8 maternal aunts and uncles, 20 first cousins. It wasn't at all unusual for us to have picking softball teams on a Sunday, and having enough people to do so. I come from a divorced home. I have a very strong matriarch, my grandmother, who has now passed, but she still continues to lead our family, which is always just very astonishing to me, that she continues to be such a presence. One of the biggest influential factors in my road to social work was when I became a mom at 15. I met my husband, and yes, we're still married. It's been 25 years. I'm not quite sure always how we made it, but we did. And I posted a couple pictures down there for you to view. But really, when that journey started, I've always had very high expectations of myself. And so when the pregnancy happened, there were many feelings of shame and guilt, and I've ruined my life. There was a lot of stigma, people staring at you. I had a counselor once tell me that there was a place for students like me, and that was night school. And so I think the positive that comes out of all of that is that those are also things that motivated me, and really catapulted my career in social work. So go ahead, Jess. So around the time that I was about 21, I decided, I actually was working for a plastic surgeon who had some conversations with me. I was his administrative assistant, actually, for a local hospital. And he had some conversations with me. And you talk about connection, right? This was a physician that actually took the time to talk to me and say, basically, Shelley, I think you can do more. You need to get back in school. And it was amazing to me, and it still is to this day, that just that one conversation gave me at least enough courage to take the leap to look into an educational journey. So from there, I achieved my BSW, my bachelor's degree in social work. I completed an internship through a child protection agency and was really immediately sold, as Jess talked about, on child welfare, and really felt like this is where I'm going to be the rest of my life. Jess's was a little opposite of saying, I don't want to be here. Mine was saying, this is the only place I want to be. During my time working in child protection, I continued to meet amazing people, and went back for my MSW degree, and then eventually, just in the last couple of years, completed my doctoral degree. Go ahead, Jess. So my time in child welfare, what I want to mention about that is beautiful experiences and beautiful people. There's not enough that I can say about that work. And not only the difficulty, the self-reflection, the self-awareness that you learn. I have this bead here, and part of that picture is because I had one beautiful experience. I had many actually, but one that I love to tell is that I was closing a child protection case pretty early on in my career, and a very sweet little girl brought me this bead, handed it to me and said, "This is for you because you don't have to worry about me anymore." And it still to this day, I still have this bead, and it is one of the most precious parts and stories of my entire career. The impact, you know, they say a lot of people last about 3 years in child protection. Around my 9th or 10th year, I realized that it was time for me to start transitioning and find something else. It's very much an impact on your family. It's a beautiful career, but it's one you also have to make sure that you're taking very good care of yourself in. And so at that point, I started feeling out different jobs. Again, this feeling of you're not good enough continued to follow me, right? That 15-year-old girl kept kind of creeping in. And I ended up just applying for a position as an assistant professor. And lo and behold, after the interview process and everything, they offered me the position. Higher education has been a blessing for me in many ways. It's renewed my passion working with students and being in the classroom with the students and sharing my experiences and watching those light bulb moments that students have. It's really just a beautiful thing, and it's helped me to see social work again through a different lens. In the last couple of years, I took an administrative position as well through the college, and that too just continued growth. Go ahead, Jess. So when I think about my journey as a whole and where I'm going to go from here, my journey has really been about just learning to trust the journey, right? I'm very much have always been a person that I like to have a schedule, I like to have routine, and I've really learned in my later life to really let things be, and everything is going to be working out. There is not one experience that I have had that I can honestly say I have not learned from. And I say that very candidly. Currently, I'm continuing to do some research. I'm an open education resource in the fellowship program right now. I want to continue to talk to students to share their own stories. We're actually using the book in our undergrad program right now. And I'm a little bit of a nomad in spirit. And so my plan is to uproot when my youngest here in 2 years is off to college and just do a lot of traveling and see the rest of the world. So I didn't put my pearl of wisdom, but again, it's really about taking the time to look around so you don't miss the things, the other opportunities that are out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. Deb is our next author.
Hi, everybody. Michelle, I didn't even put mine on either, so there you go. And happy birthday, Christina, too, by the way. I wanted to say that. My chapter is titled Walking in the Fog with My Bare Feet. And it kind of is a metaphor of my life, but also my social work journey, which to me, I don't find a difference between my profession and or my career and my life. To me, it's a parallel process that we journey through. And so when we talk about a social work journey, to me, it's a life journey. I have a master's in social work. I am also a nationally certified massage therapist, which probably means nothing to a lot of you. But in Minnesota, we're unlicensed. One of, I think, 3 states only, unfortunately. And so I chose to do the national certification exam, which is recognized in other states as being licensed. And then I'm also a Reiki master and teacher, and also I do coaching with people. And you can go ahead and turn it. I think I only have 2 or 3 slides, but I'm just going to talk and not really do much on here. But basically, you know, we're all talking about like what led us there. And I think we all know that our childhood shapes a lot of our decisions in life, right? For me, I grew up the oldest of 7 in a very small conservative Catholic family in a very small town in central Minnesota, where truly the only difference, if I must say, or the diversity was you're either Catholic or you're Lutheran. And so, you know, the lens in which you view the world is extremely small. But I also dealt with a very harsh parenting. My parents were very harsh. And I don't feel like, especially my younger years, I really had a childhood. And I talk about it in my chapter 2, that sometimes it felt as if I don't really have memories of my childhood. It feels like I have, like the memories are stored in my body like a time capsule, which is more of the memory comes to you in separate moments of how it made you feel at the time. But I also think that those experiences really brought me into social work in a sense where social work is a helping profession, and my whole life was about taking care of my younger siblings and helping my mom raise everybody. And then also, you know, the Catholic Benedictine social justice principles are really parallel to a lot of the social work principles in general. And then also throughout that journey too, I as well had my son at a very young age, and he is biracial, and so that brought up a lot of racism. It brought up a lot of things it opened your eyes and created awareness of things that that you never thought that that your family would say or do, or your community. So for me, it's been a constant point of awareness. Oh shoot, sorry, hold on one second here. I didn't plan for my phone to go off while I'm doing this. So dealing with all of that, and then really having to dissect all of my own conditioned beliefs and challenge my family's belief system, especially around gender and race. And so that kind of was the platform or the basis for what brought me into social work. And part of it too was during this time, and I use that again, the walking in the fog with the bare feet metaphor. How that came about was I actually wrote a poem, which is my Pearl of Wisdom, and I can share that later. But I wrote a poem, and my teacher at the time made me feel extremely important and just valued and worthy. And so that I kept that. I still have it in my box of like little things that you keep and you shove in your little, you know, underneath your step closet or things like that. But I've always been brought back to that that poem and the feeling that I've had about feeling worthy. And I talk about that in the chapter as well. And so for me, it's also a metaphor of all the times that you feel like you don't know where you're headed, you don't have clarity, you don't know who you are. Basically, it's about taking your shoes off and walking with your feet is about grounding yourself, trusting yourself, listening to your intuition and moving one step at a time mindfully, and eventually the fog lifts, or eventually you find your destination. And that's kind of how I think a lot of people can probably relate to that as well. So I did social work for a while. After I got my bachelor's, I was a case manager for a child and adult foster care home for people with disabilities, and then ran several houses and everything. And honestly, doing it on my own and raising my child on my own was very, very hard, and it probably burnt me out more than anything. And so that part of it made me need to to change. And so the one thing that always really interested me was the medical aspects of what I would do when I was working. We had medically fragile children, especially. And so we had nursing staff that would complement the foster care staff within the agency. And we had to learn, as the foster care piece or component of it, we had to learn a lot of the nursing cares. And so I worked with ventilators. I would change tracheostomies and G tubes, and I did lots of physical and occupational therapies, and really like honed in, whether it was administering medications or doing things like that. Did a lot of the medical cares as well. And then also within the adult home that I ran, we had several people that had cancer, and we worked with a lot of end of life issues, and mental health and dementia. And so the medical components of it was really intriguing to me, and I loved it. But for me, the thought of going back into another system when I was just so needing to get out of this system for various reasons, the one thing that kept coming to me was massage therapy. And so I just randomly, signed up to do classes and changed my profession. And I was planning on doing a little bit of both. And then my massage therapy career and business, I started my own business, took off, and I was able within a few months to sustain myself full time. And so then I ended technically my social work role and pursued massage therapy full time. But as I started working throughout the years, I learned that massage is not a very linear process. It is expansive, it is holistic, and a lot of the stuff that happened to come up within a session was trauma when I was working with people. And it could be just very unannounced, unsuspecting. One person that comes into mind as I was working on, he kept having Charlie horses in his calves. And so we were working on that, and all of a sudden we hit a spot, and I could feel the adhesions within his soleus muscle. And I said, what is going on right in here? And he said, the first thing that comes to me is a gun. And he said that when he was a child, his mom had ended her life. And when he first learned that his mom had passed away, his dad yelled for him and his brother to come. And he remembers dropping his bike, and he was probably 8 at the time. He dropped his bike that he was riding with his brother, and he remembers the bike landing on his leg exactly in that spot. And he fell down, and then he got back up, and that was when he ran into the house. And so those are things that, this person, he's, a very successful CEO who came in for, muscle spasms, ended up having a lot of trauma being released while we were working. And he's not unique. I still have so many things that happen every time I work with people. And so as I'm working, and as my clientele is changing, and my eyes are opening up to things that are happening and changing within my practice, I feel like it's time to go back. And I think that, again, the work that I do is not a linear process, because when you're working with somebody, it's like this co-created relationship that I felt needed psychotherapy along with it, so we can connect the dots, come full circle, figure out what is happening and what is trapped within our body. Let's work through this and bring this out, so then we can have a better understanding. And so I went back to grad school and had met a lot of wonderful people, and was really excited and wanted to do this dually degreed modality. And Then in my, when I did my qualitative research project, learned that, boy, there's a lot more barriers, and I have this very idealistic idea of what I am experiencing and what I desire and what I can see the profession going and how this could work. But there's quite a bit of barriers. Not only is it professional boundaries, but it's also different lenses. What I found in my research was that the massage therapists that I interviewed, every single one of them said, yes, this happens to us all the time. Yes, we feel inept and don't know what to do with this, and we want to integrate. And the social workers actually were very skeptical of boundaries and of touch. They're very, very afraid of touch and how that would work. And they were noticing that there is a connection and that they do believe in the potential work, but there was a lot more hesitation in the social work field, to be honest with you. So here I am, 8 years post-grad school. I am working to perfect, I need to copyright my work. I need to write things down in a very systematic way, and I need to figure out how I can present things in a way that is, that will work. And I am hopeful. I do think that we are headed in a new direction, and I do think that it can work. It just needs to be the right people, the right time, and I need to be more prepared is kind of what it is. Plus, let's be honest, in 8 years, life has happened too. So, oh yeah, thanks for moving that. You know, I have a son who's now going to be 26 in a couple weeks, and so like, you know, just helping him navigate life with school and grad school and moving him around all over the U.S. with, you know, grad school and whatnot himself. So, you know, life just kind of happens too. But anyway, the one thing I just wanted to talk about in regards to the social work field in particular is that I really think that we're at a turning point in history in which we're here to ask ourselves, like, what do we really truly desire, not only in our personal lives, but in our communities and in our society. And I really think like the pandemic is one example, and I think we can also agree that possibly the previous administration is another example that it is, in my mind, a soft opening of what is to come, that it has amplified and illuminated so much that has been simmering underneath the surface for so long, that really social work profession is needed more than ever. And so for me, I look at this time as an opportunity that I think that we can find very viable solutions to creating and supporting new frameworks and embracing and recognizing new integrative models for treatment. And I think it'll only elevate our profession as a whole and in the important work that we still have to do yet for humanity. So that is my story, and I'm sure I missed out a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to say, but you know, we only have so much time. But the one thing I forgot to do was my little pearl of wisdom, and I pulled my book out, and my pearl of wisdom is actually the poem that I wrote as a child, and it's a haiku, and it's I don't know how old I was, probably 9 years old, but it says, when I walk in the fog with my bare feet, I splash in the puddles like this, splash. And when the rain comes down, it sounds like this, drop, drop. And so, and actually it's probably an alliteration poem. And so the other part of my poem that I really like too is that even though we are in this fog, so to speak, we also have to play. And as we work and move mindfully, the thing that I love about this is don't forget to splash in the puddles. Don't forget to listen to the rain or feel the rain. And so that is also part of my personal journey too. And I'm grateful for both professions, that social justice passion within me, but then also the massage therapy, holistic healing part of me helps to kind of balance that and kind of work to be a better healer, I guess. So there you go.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, by the way, everybody.
Next, we have Hillary.
Wow, I am so thankful to be a part of this panel, to be a part of this book project, to be a part of this profession. It just feels really affirming. If you ever see my PowerPoints, you will notice I always acknowledge my children on my first slide. My daughter is Iris Awentio. My son is Wambly, the eagle. And if anybody ever wants to reach me, there's my email address. Next slide, please. So setting the stage, what kind of put me on my path? I grew up in Pullman, Washington. That's kind of a picture of the Palouse Hills there, those green treeless hills. It's a very white area of the country, Eastern Washington State. My mother was Lakota. I identify as Lakota. My father was Appalachian, basically hillbilly. And, you know, there was always a sense that I was a little bit different from the people in the surrounding community. My family moved to Spain when I was 9. And in fact, we'd been in Spain for 3 months when I was 7, but we moved there when I was 9. And boy, did I really, really feel different then. I was put in a Catholic school, and my family wasn't Catholic, but that was the education system there. And at the time, Generalissimo Francisco Franco was still the fascist dictator of Spain. You know, he was a contemporary of Hitler and Mussolini. And that's where my family lived in a time of political instability. Franco was quite old at the time. And there was a question of what's going to happen when he's no longer around. Would Spain go back to the monarchy? Would it go to democracy? So there was a lot of bombings, a lot of political instability. And I was the child in the back of the classroom who didn't speak the language. Spanish was the first language. Some people spoke French. Nobody spoke English. So I knew what it was not to fit in, not to understand what was going on. Well, my family moved back to the United States in 1972. And it wasn't that long afterwards that Saigon fell in 1975. And there was a major influx of Southeast Asian refugees into my school. Now, remember, this is an almost exclusively white area. And these students were kept separate. They were in our school, but they weren't integrated with us. So it was like, who were these different people? So I think a lot of things in my background really primed me to be a social worker that focuses on cultural diversity. And so that's really how I've built my career. Next slide, please. I went to Antioch College. Some of you may know that Antioch was the first college in the country to admit people without regards to race, creed, or color. It was the first college to admit women to any major that they wanted, not just home ec. And it had a co-op program, which is why I really chose it. I figured I could try out different fields of social work. And I'm one of these rare people who never changed my major. I knew I wanted to be a social worker when I started college when I was 18. The motto of Antioch College is be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity. And that has really stuck with me. 2 professors in particular really shaped the way that I think about things. At the top is a picture of Jewel Graham. She taught most of the social work classes. She also taught law classes. She taught gender studies classes. And one thing that I really remember about her is how transparent she was in sharing her thought processes. She wasn't on a pedestal. She wasn't perfect. And she talked to us students as human beings, and she shared openly with us. She was the president of the board of directors of the YWCA internationally. This was in the 1980s, early 1980s. The YWCA was going to hold their international meeting in South Africa. This was during the time of apartheid. As a Black American, she could go there with some privilege and be okay, but she had this really moral dilemma, this ethical quandary. Is it okay to travel to a place where there is apartheid, where she would have privilege as an American? And she shared this with us. And so I always appreciated how you can think through problems that have no easy answer. There's not a clear, yes, this is what you should do. I also took a lot of classes with a professor called Al Denman. He wasn't a social worker, but he taught classes in religion, in philosophy, in law. He was a straight white male ordained minister who took it upon himself to be the best ally that he could and leverage his privilege. He deliberately stood as a bookend to Jewel Graham and supported her in her work. And in his classes, he always made us read all sorts of authors to inform our papers. A paper could never be complete if we were only reading what mainstream straight white men were writing. We had to find works by authors of color, by women, by immigrants. Next slide, please. So as I left Antioch, I moved forward with my master's at Columbia. I worked for a while at Greater New York Fund in New York City. That was the allocation branch of the United Way. Got sick in New York City, moved to Idaho of all places, and landed in academia. And have spent the last 28 years in academia at University at Buffalo. Always, I have been really involved in professional organizations. NASW has been the backbone for me. I joined as a student, and boy, was I proud to join as a student. And when I left New York City and I moved to Idaho, I was feeling kind of lonely and unmoored and didn't really have the connections. So at that time, the North Branch of NASW in Idaho was lying dormant. I took that on as the coordinator, kind of out of my own needs. So I could gather social workers once a month. We met at a restaurant. We rotated through different communities. We always had a speaker. And that's what kept me going. I have an even greater role with professional associations now. And I really, really work to help my profession be responsive and accountable as a way of winning victories. It goes back to that Antioch thing. I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of presentations. And as a Lakota woman, one of the few words that my mother had taught me was the word Iyeshka. It means to be the bridge, the translator, the interpreter. And that's what I've always done with my career. Next slide, please. My proudest moments really have nothing to do with particular jobs I had or particular employers. It was more what happens when you pick up the phone. Because I had done a lot of writing and presentations, people found me. One time I picked up the phone and it was a defense attorney asking if I would do some mitigation work for a Native prisoner on death row. I had no idea what mitigation work was, but it's basically doing a big assessment. So I wrote this assessment over 100 pages, the life story of this particular man. So when the judge had to decide, should the sentence be commuted? Should this person be taken off death row? By reading my assessment. They could see the mitigating factors of what child abuse and extreme poverty had done to shape this person. The judge could see a human being. And I've gone on to do additional mitigation work with Native American men on death row. Now, some people involved with the International Federation of Social Workers were very committed to Indigenous issues, and they started writing a statement on Indigenous peoples, and they read my writing too. In fact, I'm really proud that social workers came up with a statement on Indigenous peoples before the United Nations did. Some of you may be familiar with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. IFSW came out with their statement first. And they contacted me to make sure that they were on the right page with the statement that they were drafting, because a lot of the IFSW people, they were allies, they were good people, but they didn't have the depth of background in Indigenous peoples. After I helped with that statement, I got invited to speak at the United Nations. There's a permanent forum on Indigenous issues. I've been there quite a few times, and I'm one of the few social work representatives that gets to do that. So social work got me to the UN. People in my community who were concerned about the mascots for sports teams and how Native Americans are treated as caricatures rather than human beings, well, they called me too. Some Native elders reached out to me, some traditional people reached out to me, and as a social worker, I could talk about what stereotypes do to people, to the human spirit, and how that can be very disfiguring. And dropping mascots is a really contentious issue. A lot of people in the community were not happy about that. Social workers have mediation skills. And when community members and advocates to change the mascots at a local school came together, there was a facilitated intervention with a social worker at every table, helping people talk with each other. I got an additional call about challenging employment discrimination. A lot of my writing is about the importance of culture in the helping processes. And there was a state who was hiring a lot of human service workers who weren't culturally competent. In fact, they tended to hire a lot of white high school graduates with no cultural training or background. And the employer didn't give them any training or background. And they didn't hire trained social workers who were Indigenous. So there was a clear case of discrimination. The Department of Justice, the feds contacted me, and I was an expert witness in that case. More recently, looking at stuff that comes across my email, I saw how other associations were holding the social work profession accountable, particularly some of our Canadian colleagues. And I said, well, why can't we do that in the United States? So I worked with a group of people to develop a statement of accountability for the harms that the social work profession has done to Indigenous peoples. And we released a teaching guide for that about a month ago. Next slide, please. A lot of what I'm doing now, it's these leadership roles. Some are in non-Indigenous spaces, like being board chair for Council on Social Work Education. I mean, to me, that's a dream come true, to be the first Indigenous person in that position. And I've got an Indigenous vice chair as well. So Native social workers, we're moving into these spaces. And I bridge spaces like the IFSW. For years, their structure has been limited to countries. So they have representatives, like NASW is a member of IFSW. The Canadian Association of Social Workers is a member of IFSW. Well, how do Indigenous people fit? Because we're not countries. IFSW modified their structure. And for the first time, they have an Indigenous Commission with representatives from the 5 regions of the world. And I'm the facilitator. I'm the global commissioner that brings together the representative from North America, from South America, Caribbean, from Africa, from Europe, from Asia Pacific. So I use my social work skills to facilitate the social workers. And one of the most important things I think I do is hold space for Indigenous social workers and social work educators, because it can be really, really difficult in mainstream academia, in mainstream agencies who don't necessarily understand how we're trying to bridge these roles. So for the last 26 years, I have been having an annual meeting of Indigenous and tribal social work educators and allies. Next slide, please. I'm kind of at the closing stage of my career, which is a pretty cool place to be, actually. And I get to do the things that I do because I stand on the shoulders of the people who did this work before me. That gives me responsibilities. I need to take the trust that was placed in me. I need to open doors for others. I need to be the ambassador. I need to change my own profession so it lives up to its values. So we live up to our potential, because we're a great profession, but we haven't always done great things. I do like that it's a very broad, holistic profession, so we can share the load. You know, some of my colleagues who spoke before me talked about the clinical tracks that they went into. I'll tell you, I've never been a clinician, but I don't have to be, because there are really good social workers doing clinical work. I don't need to be all things to all people, because we share this in our profession. Next slide, please. As individual social workers, we can each find our niche, like I did. We can make a difference in this world, knowing that our profession is greater than the sum of its parts. I do believe that each and every one of us has a responsibility to make a difference in the lives of others and in our shared world. My pearl of wisdom, or dare I say turquoise nugget, kind of indigenizing there, is we can all win victories for humanity. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hillary. It's so fun to hear you guys, to hear everybody's stories again, and I've read them all. So really, you guys, to sum it up, we want to respond to your questions. We want to hear what you guys want to hear from us, or is anyone telling themselves their own journey story, and how is that experience? Because we just really want people to know that stories shared can change the world. And so if we are brave enough to share our journey stories, others will also hopefully feel inspired to share theirs, and then we will feel called to listen and join and hold space for and build the collective. Does anybody have any questions right off the bat? We can put them in the chat, you guys, if you want, or if you want to voice them, you could raise your hand too, and we can call on you. Or any of the authors have any follow-up, like you want to ask a question to those that are participating?
Jess, we did get a few questions that came in, so I'll just pop in and share them with you guys really quickly if no one in the audience has any questions, or you guys can raise your virtual hands and I will take a pause so you guys can ask your own questions. So the first question that we have in that came in is, how do you identify your niche as a student?
Anybody want to take that? Christina, Hillary, Deb, Shelley?
I'll start. I think the niche finds us. So I ended up doing cultural diversity stuff and making sure that my profession is responsive to culturally diverse people, kind of based on who I was, based on my own background, based on my own needs. So I think it was kind of finding a calling. If you're not sure what your niche is yet, I wouldn't really spend too much time worrying about it. And it's okay to try different things, to test the water. You know, am I good at this? Do I like that? Again, that's the blessing of the breadth of our profession. You will find the right spot at the right time, and that's what I believe.
To go with Hillary, I always remind myself, we're not gonna, you don't just know who you are, you have to discover who you are. So like she's saying, it will find you when you get to know yourself and where you best fit.
And to echo off that, I think the best way to do that is as if you're going through different experiences, internships, jobs, etc., notice what's coming up, right? Are you getting frustrated? Are you getting excited, right? Have like journal. I tell this to my social work students, have something where you can write these things down so you can go back and analyze and process and start to pull things out, then just kind of keeping it all in your brain, right? Because that is how you become more self-aware. I had to learn that I liked to create programs, and when I didn't have creativity and I felt stifled, that was troubling for me. So if you're able to have the opportunity to jot down these things, to become more self-aware, to notice what you like, what you don't like, it'll allow you to see what you're looking to do.
Thank you guys so much. So we do have some questions that came into the chat. So I'm going to pull up the first one. Samantha wants to know, do you think it's a negative thing to be too empathetic, and how do you disconnect?
Can I please answer that?
Yes, Deb.
Oh my gosh, no, we need empathy. We need empathy. Please do not think it's a negative thing to be too empathetic. Please, please, please. Empathy is what connects us to each other as a human being. We are human beings first and social workers second, okay? And do not disconnect, because the moment you disconnect is the moment you will lose your sense of self and your sense of identity. So please do not do that. Of course, there are ways to work on vicarious trauma and secondary trauma and work that you are going to experience as a social worker, but you need to seek out self-care and find your own way of self-care, whether it's through mindfulness activities or connecting with the community. But please do not think it's negative to be empathetic, because that is not true. Not true at all.
And if I could build on that, I totally agree. Empathy is a good thing, but we do need to take care of ourselves.
Yep.
We do need to monitor what's coming up for ourselves. So if you're feeling overwhelmed with the empathy, find a way to take care of yourself and know your limits, know the boundaries that make sense for you. When I was first asked about doing the death row work, my empathy got pulled in a lot of different ways. One, I said yes, I would do this. That I was, you know, how often do we explicitly have an opportunity to do work that is literally life and death? So I said yes, and I said yes consciously before asking the crimes that my client was accused of, because my mind was kind of racing, like, what do you need to do to end up on death row? I had also done some work with battered women, and I'm thinking, you know, what if this person has crimes against women? What if there's rape? What if there's murder? And of course, it turned out that there was both. So I had to kind of monitor. I wanted to be able to empathize with the client without having my judgment clouded by just seeing the crime first. I wanted to see the human being first. But that's some of the toughest work that I've ever done. And when I was in San Quentin, and I had to interview somebody in shackles, dehumanizing place. Afterwards, I went to Muir Woods. I went to the ocean. I had a young infant at the time, and I held on to my baby, And I was on the beach at sunset and I appreciated that sunset. And I was very conscious of the people who would never see the sunset again. Those who had lost their lives, my client who was locked up. And I really had to recognize my privilege, recognize how I manage the empathy, because I needed to be empathetic with everybody, but also with myself for what it felt like to be in a dehumanizing environment. So we absolutely need to don't lose your empathy, but also tune into yourself and your own needs as well. Because if you don't, you will burn out, and you need to recognize when you're burning out and change it up. Step away, whether it's changing the profession, changing your job, so that you don't lose that empathy. So I'm off my soapbox now.
No, that was a really good response, Hillary. And I think it's a perfect segue to the next question that we had. I don't want to butcher your name, so I'm not going to attempt to say it. The question was directed to all the speakers, but directly, particularly Deb. And the question was, when considering the distressing factors that cause burnout, surely social workers do exercise that alleviate from the distress. However, is burnout usually eventually the last outcome, and must one eventually burn out?
No, I don't think so. I think piggybacking off of what Hillary beautifully said too is taking care of yourself is a daily process. It is not just when I'm feeling burnt out, I start working on myself. This is about every day, whether you exercise, go for a walk, be in nature, have your monthly, weekly massages, or like acupuncture, I mean, journaling, just whatever it might be for you to have self-care, even if it's taking your shoes off and walking on the grass, and so you can feel what the grass feels like. It's connecting with other human beings, your family. But it's a daily process, and I don't think you need. I don't think people can or like your fate is not toward burnout. That's definitely a fallacy. I think it's a reminder that you have to work on yourself. Like, it is a dual process. You can't give all of yourself and not have anything in return. You have to work on yourself first.
Thank you so much. Brittany, I do see your hand. If you want to unmute and ask your question, we really appreciate that.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
So I wanted to ask, I really enjoyed everybody's stories. I did relate with Deb a little bit more, but I related with all of you actually. And you're walking barefooted in the fog. That's where I am in my life right now. I know I want a career in social work. I had children very young, and so I've started later in life in getting into this field, into my career, but I've always kind of like, without actually being a social worker, I've always actually like been in this field. Like, I'm always helping people. I'm always giving my all to anybody that I can. So now that I'm at the end of my undergrad, I have this weight on my shoulders of like, what are you going to do with your bachelor's? I'm going to get my master's. That's not a question. It's just, I think that the way that my life is set up with 3 kids and financial responsibilities, I need to work before, like, that needs to be my next step before I can continue with my master's. So doing it like part-time in the evenings online, I know that my school has great opportunities for that in graduate school. So just, does anybody have any like resources or information on like what we can do with a bachelor's that's still fulfilling, but, and still, has some help financially with our families, to support our families, and still, being able to manage our time so that we can go to college for our master's?
Well, first, can I say something? And please don't think that I'm being critical or anything, but I think you're in your head too much. And one thing, the advice that I would give you is to really sit with it. Sit with it, feel in your body, like what really speaks to your heart, what speaks to you. I think when we get to a point where we're making this mental list in our head too much, that we're really not navigating, like sometimes the thoughts and the pressure and the plan of what we should and should not do becomes that fog that I wrote about. And so I would sit with it for a while and really feel like, what are you drawn to and how can you make that work? Obviously, there are other resources that other people can talk about as far as professional resources and ideas on how you can work part-time here or do whatever, or maybe there's other examples, but just taking a step back and listening to what you just said, I'm wondering if part of the heaviness is just needing to get out of your head a little bit right now, and the pressure and the having this solid plan right away, and maybe just sit with it for a while and allow yourself to think, what brings me joy, what makes me happy, what are my interests, or what would I think would be fun or enjoyable or whatever. That would be my first advice. And other people can certainly share as well.
I'll build on that just a little bit. Personally, I think in dialogue. So you don't have to go through this reflective process all by yourself. I like networking and connecting with people. Go to places where you have an opportunity to have conversations with other social workers, other social work students, and you never know what opportunities might present themselves. I did go straight from my undergraduate degree to my master's, so I don't know specifically what job opportunities would be there at the undergraduate level, but I bet you somebody else knows that. Go to some events where you can talk to people, where you can network with people, go to NASW things, go to conferences, and see what opportunities present themselves and what feels good.
I'd like to just add there to get creative with the role search. I think sometimes we get locked into just looking up social work. But I took some time to do my bachelor's and getting my master's. And then even when I was doing my master's, I needed to work. I was not able to just take off time to just focus on school. I had to work and support myself. So my jobs would be family support coordinator, program coordinator, those kinds of roles, which don't typically show up when you type in social work, but for sure align to what we would do. So I was working for early intervention, which is a federal program for infants and toddlers with special needs and disabilities. So I was just working in their central office, also going out and doing presentations and things like that. So I think getting creative with your job search can be beneficial, because they're definitely out there, and you don't need to first get your master's to start getting your feet wet and also getting paid a good salary. I just think it's sometimes getting creative and not just looking up only things that are standard social work jobs, but you will still be able to use what you've been able to learn in your school.
Thank you so much, Christina. And Brittany, I wanted to add something because I am a recent graduate. What I wanted to just put in, I'm not one of the authors, but I do work for the chapter. I wanted to share that sometimes, similar to what Christina said, looking for things that are not social work when you're looking for jobs is the first place to stop yourself and go, instead of putting social work, because you'll see things like care manager or case managers, and those jobs may be demanding and may not give you the opportunity to still fulfill your career path of going back to school. And the second thing I wanted to encourage you to do, maybe looking within and seeing if an advanced standing program that is really quick would be an option for you. For me, I finished my master's in 7 months. And I know that in the beginning, I thought that was a long period of time, but I realized how quickly it went because I had my BSW. So that's another thing to consider. And I see one more hand. So Jakari, you can unmute and ask your question.
So don't judge my bonnet. Hi, everyone. So really quick, I just wanted to thank everybody for sharing their stories. I also wanted to say hi to Brittany because I saw her at the orientation that we had for social work for the BSW program. And I really resonated with all of you, but in particular, Deb, Christina, and Hillary. And I myself have thought of, even studying massage therapy, going into that. I had a conversation with my therapist one session, and I told her, oh, what if I get my license and then also, get my degree in social work? Like, I wanted to do it all because I could see the connection between both fields. I also am interested in Reiki and all of those things. So I guess my question is for Deb in particular. How has that transition been for you? And, if anyone else wants to jump in and maybe connections that they've seen within social work and holistic healing in general, I would just love to hear from you guys and get your perspective on that.
Well, holistic healing can be a way of life and a practice, but it can also be a profession. And for me, it's both. I'm not technically integrating because I can't legally do psychotherapy. In my practice, I do coaching with people. So as I'm working and things come up, we bring awareness to what is up, and then they bring that awareness to their counselor to talk about, or ways that they can work through that themselves. So technically, I am not practicing social work. But in reality, my social work degree is not separate from me. The information that I've learned, or the things that I have learned over the years within my social work profession, is still within me. You can't separate that. You can't separate that knowledge and that wisdom from either profession. So for you, it would be, is this a profession or is this just a way of life where Reiki can help me to learn how to do self-care, to balance myself, to work through secondary trauma, to work through stress, whatever it is. Or, do I wear the social work hat? Or is it a profession for me? Right now, at least in Minnesota, nobody is able to integrate professionally and do psychotherapy and touch therapy. So I can't advise you on that. But you can certainly, I'm not sure which state you're calling from, or you're from, but
New Jersey.
Yeah, so you can revisit that with your state licensing and see if there's anybody practicing that currently in New Jersey. I'm not aware of that. I've actually had, over the years, phone calls from people all over the United States saying, how are you doing this? I want to do this. And so it's not something that is legally recognized right now. Does that help you?
Yes, it does. I guess in a way, it's like, even if I can combine them, I think it is what you said, like it's a way of life for me. And it's just interesting to me, like when I heard your story, I was like, oh, okay, like I'm not the only one who sees the similarities and finds it interesting,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It's all, if I can just add something, it's also like practicing what you lead, right? So if you, like for Deb, I know that she does this, but if Reiki is part of who you are, it will become part of your social work, even if you're not doing it as a practice. But if you embody those holistic things that you find helpful for self, it's going to show up no matter if you're a case manager or, something directly related to that. It will be embodied in your work.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, guys, we do have a question and it's from Dave Norman. He says, as an author entering the social work field in midlife, I love seeing the power of personal stories in your book to reach, inform, and inspire others. Hillary found a tremendous way of bringing storytelling into social work on death row. What other opportunities have you all discovered for storytelling and writing in our career field?
When Christina and I first talked about this book, we were talking about using it with students because I adjunct teach in a bachelor's level, and it was, I was finding, like Shelley was saying, it's really healing to tell yourself your own story. And I was finding I was so encouraging of others to tell themselves their own stories, but I hadn't yet written my own out, like literally written it out and integrated, I know my own. And so we're using it in like bachelor's level courses and helping people tell themselves their own stories. So that's how we're finding ways to use it.
And I will add that recently I've had a number of opportunities to be an editor for a book and help people bring their stories forward. My most recent one was the Routledge International Handbook of Indigenous Resilience. And so I was able to incorporate the stories of people all over the world. And some of the most powerful that are coming to mind right now are some of the youth stories. There was one chapter co-authored by 4 youth and 1 adult. And one of the youth being like age 13 to 16, one of the young women had lost her mother. Some of you may know that there are many missing and murdered Indigenous women. There's more attention to that in Canada, but it happens in every country. It happens a lot in the United States as well as in other places in the world. And so this young woman had, her mother had disappeared. There is still no closure of whatever happened to her mother. And this young woman bounced around from family member to family member, homelessness, getting involved with older men, getting involved with drugs. And at the time she was writing her story, she was still like 13, 14 years old. Being able to facilitate the process of her sharing that story was really, really important to me. Hearing from an insider, I don't know what it's like to lose a mom and have that level of uncertainty, not even knowing what happened to the body. Stories are so powerful and so important. A lot of what we do as social workers is help people to process their stories, think through the things that have happened to them, the choices that they would like to make in their lives, the stories that they would like to create for themselves in the future. So stories are really an important part of what we do as social workers. People can story themselves as, oh, I'm a victim. All of these things happened to me. People can story themselves as, I'm resilient. I'm a survivor. I'm moving forward. And we can be a part of other people's stories. So I really appreciate the question about stories because I think that can happen in so many ways. And we can help people reframe the strength in our stories, the strength in our clients, the strength in ourselves.
This is so wild for me that this is coming up right now. Right before this call, I was finishing up some consulting work. I'm working with an organization that's partnering with a school district in Pennsylvania, where the students themselves are leading a project on how they can help their teachers understand the impact of racial trauma on their mental health. And the current module I'm writing for them is on how they can tell their stories. And then tomorrow I am facilitating a conversation with a corporation for a short clip all about the stories we tell ourselves and how the stories we tell ourselves impacts our mental health. So I think it is again, it goes back to like what I love about social work, the creativity and the power with storytelling, is that it not just helps to impact change. I tell stories all day in terms of helping people to feel connected to understanding mental health, understanding what students go through when it relates to their mental health, but also using storytelling to help motivate change, right? Stories can connect us in such a deeper and emotional way. And then when we're able to do that, right, with other people, it does allow for us to push forward, to make some intentional shifts, to have a deeper understanding and to connect in a more beautiful, deeper way.
Mhm. The one thing I want to add off of what Christina's saying is stories are so impactful. And so as an author and the person asking the question is an author, there's also other modalities to harvest the stories. And there's really beautiful work happening in the world, like harvesting lived experience stories in child welfare through podcasting. And so there, you know, like I encourage social workers to find where they hear and resonate and embody the stories they hear and use that modality, whatever way it is to harvest it. For me, it's, you know, writing and journaling. Some people it's through connection with others and storytelling verbally. Some it's, you know, making movies and storytelling that way. And so whatever modality best fits, that's, there's a lot of spaces that it's coming into right now, the power of story.
Thank you all so much for taking my question. I'm Dave Norman, University of New England in Portland, Maine, and I really appreciate your converging perspectives on my question. But, especially Hillary, what you were sharing, it sounds a lot like my layman's understanding of narrative therapy, which is a class I'll be taking next semester. So when I say it sounds like, that's an uninformed opinion, but I can't wait to take that class. And yeah, look more as I begin my journey into the social work field at the power of story and at ways that I can use my skills and very few connections as a former professional storyteller to help other people understand their stories, communicate their stories, and then maybe do something with that. And it seems to all start with helping a person kind of understanding what they're about, what they need, where they would like to go, and what strengths they have to get there. And yeah, I really appreciate your perspectives on how else I could be involved in other people's storytelling processes. Really value that. Thank you.
Okay, I do have one question. So I know Deb spoke a lot about holistic work, and I thought that this would be a very fitting question just to ask the panelists. So as the social work profession starts to integrate self-care into our code of ethics, what would you guys suggest for students as they tackle this journey first as students and into their professional life to integrate self-care and even the holistic approach of Reiki, yoga, or whatever it is that they need to do to fill that cup?
I would say there is no one size fits all. There is no one model of self-care. Although since people are talking about massage, I'll put that out there that that's probably my best self-care. That was actually started by social work students decades ago when the Student Association at my university brought massage therapists to campus, to our School of Social Work for little 5-minute chair massages. And I've continued with that for almost 3 decades. But I think self-care can be very personal, whether it's going for walks, whether it can be being with pets, whether it's reading. I think each one of us needs to figure out what resonates for us, what feels affirming for us, what is meaningful for us. I mean, for some people, it would be going out and playing a game of basketball. That's not me. I'm not doing the sports thing. For other people, it can be listening to music, maybe calm, soothing music. Maybe music that's like, yeah, you know, really get those feelings out there. But I do think that it's different for each and every one of us. So each student needs to think for themselves, what feels affirming for me? What makes me feel good? Is it quiet time by myself? Is it social time with people who love me? What makes me feel balanced and whole and healthy and ready to move forward? It can be a very personal question for each of us.
Can I add to that? Because I have noticed I really had to attend to the evolution of my self-care. So I'm the mom of 5, and what I could do 10 years ago for self-care is not what I have access to do now. And so really acknowledging the evolution of what I need. And then as a student, especially grad school, I had to really remember mental health first aid was self-care too. So completely overwhelmed, right? Like breathing, the way that I was breathing, making sure I was breathing well so that I wouldn't get headaches. I was eating what my body needed, not what I was thinking I wanted. I was getting good sleep and I was drinking water. I mean, seriously, attending to those really basic mental health first aid things was really prominent self-care for me in a time that felt like completely overwhelming. So evolution and then mental health first aid. Christina or Deb, do you have?
No, I think both of you said it beautifully. Definitely, it's not a one size fits all. It's whatever you gravitate towards. And then definitely the breath. I mean, it's amazing how much we hold our breath when we're stressed out, and just by breathing and doing deep breathing exercises helps to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms our brain, calms our body, and lowers our blood pressure. So there's science behind it as well. But yes, even simple breathing helps.
I agree. As my therapist tells me, as long as you're alive, you can breathe. So harnessing the power of your breath is so important. One thing I do when I do some of my trainings or workshops on self-care is just really like, how do we reimagine what self-care is? I think as a society, we've gotten to a place where when we think of self-care, right, it's all over social media, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. And we just think it's like the getting our nails done, the massages, like whatnot, right? But I don't think we do a good enough job of actually asking ourselves, well, what do I actually need? And I think that's a hard question for some people to answer. I know sometimes I struggle, right? Like I'll do something that I'm like, this is self-care, it's just make me feel better. And I'm like, I don't, right? Because that's not actually what I need. Do I need something that's more emotional, something that's more physical, something more spiritual? And I think if we can first start there of understanding, well, what are my needs? And then from there, right, we can incorporate certain actions or activities, certain resources. I think that can make it easier to integrate it versus thinking self-care has to be something that's like super separate versus how do I integrate it into the general functioning and fabrics of my everyday life.
The one thing also, you guys, that was really important for me is exactly what Christina was saying, is getting to know all of those like senses on how you feel good self-care, and then noticing when I'm doing all of those things and I still don't feel well, could be a system issue, right? Sometimes social workers try to bear the burden of this is because I don't care for myself, when sometimes it isn't that. So when you know what your body needs and you attend to those needs, then you can ask deeper questions of, is this a self-care issue or is this a system care issue?
And sometimes it's a medical issue.
Yeah.
I never want to forget that. I had my first bout last year where I was like, I truly feel depressed. Like I feel like I'm a shell walking around. And then because of other things going on, they ended up running blood tests for some heart stuff. Turns out my vitamin D was like less than half of what it should be, right? Like, so super depleted. So sometimes it actually sometimes could be something medically going around. So making sure we're also keeping up to date with those pieces too.
Thank you guys for those pearls of wisdom, like you guys said early in the book. So as we come to the close to the end, I do want to ask one thing of all the panelists, and I wanted to know if you guys have any parting words that you can share with our students or emerging social workers on how to just feel pride in entering this profession with so many things going on and so many people saying things about the profession and saying how limited social work is. Are there any parting words that you guys can share to impart some inspiration so that they can keep going?
Well, I don't know whoever said social work was limited. So I would say take that broad view. You know, social workers work on death row. Social workers change mascots. Social workers work in nursing homes. Social workers work in hospitals. Social workers are politicians. Social workers change systems. Social workers help refugees. So I get excited thinking about all the amazing stuff that social workers do. And again, realizing that I don't have to be all things to all people. I can do a part of social work that is meaningful for me and at the same time be a part of this broader profession. And I have always been proud of social work, even when I see social workers make some mistakes. It's about doing better. It's not about, throwing out the profession or trashing the profession. It's a great profession grounded in social justice. It's a profession about relationships, and you can tell I'm still excited about it. And I got my first social work degree in 1984. So I'm excited by being on this panel with all of you, by being part of this book, and by being in the context of these students that are starting out. So I'm still excited.
I think my parting words would be social work chooses you. And so we're all here because social work chose us. And so trust the process. You will find where you fit into this profession, even if it doesn't yet make sense. And there is a place for you. I read an article about the MSWs, the new MBA, like social work is fitting into the places it needs to fit in, and relationships are being built and are the foundation in even now business settings. So you will find where you fit, like trust this process. You are here and called to this profession for a reason.
I would say just to stay curious, try new things, ask the questions, just remain curious. I think even if you try one space, right, maybe it was just that actual, like, so say you tried child welfare, but maybe it was just that like county or that like city. Maybe it could have been something, it could be a completely different experience someplace else, right? Stay curious. And I think the more we can stay curious, the more we can enjoy the field, we can enjoy the profession, and continue to be hopeful that you will find your space, because there's always a space for someone.
Michelle, do you want me to go next? Or I will. I think
Shelley had to log off.
Oh, that's why. Okay. For me, I'm just going to go back to my poem about walking in the fog with your bare feet. Like the fog is going to happen in your life, and being mindful and trusting your gut, your intuition, listening to yourself, and not being afraid to embrace all of that as an experience, as a personal journey, and it will reveal the path in which you need to be at.
Thank you to each and every one of you guys for answering that. I think that it really helps students to find a little glimmer of hope as they journey through this journey of academia as a social worker. And, for the emerging professionals, just seeing that there's so much diversity within the profession. Hearing Hillary's story about death row, even me, who has a broad view of social work, I wouldn't even put one and one together. And I really think that excited me for you. And that experience sounded like it was one that was really fulfilling. And just hearing the stories in this book, it really opened my eyes as a new graduate. And I can probably speak for the students on the line that hearing the bits and pieces of the story is filling a tank that we probably didn't know that we needed 2 days ago or even a month ago. So if there are any students on the line, I would recommend that you guys try to get the book, get your hands on them. I don't know if Jess has any links that she can drop so that you guys can quickly get access to it, just so you guys can read it and connect with the authors. But yeah.
Would it be helpful if we dropped like our contact information in the chat in case anyone wants to reach out to us to continue talking? Okay.
You guys could definitely do that as well. And on behalf of NASW New Jersey, Delaware, and Minnesota, we would like to thank you guys for coming and spending your Tuesday evening with us and allowing our beautiful panelists to sow seeds of wisdom and hope and inspiration into each and every one of you guys. If you would like to connect with them, they're dropping their information in the chat. So copy it really quickly, click a link, grab a screenshot, make sure you have this information so you can stay connected with them. And as always, you can stay connected with our chapter, www.naswnj.org. On our student tabs, we will have all of our student programming for the year, but we are really thankful that you guys took the opportunity to stay with us this long. And thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, have a great night, stay safe, and enjoy your academic journey.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a great night. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.